Amari had always dreamed of a quiet, joyful life. She was a kind-hearted girl from Zubari, known for her gentle voice, soft smile, and the way she treated everyone with respect, whether child or elder. When she married Kehinde, it felt like a dream come true. Kehinde came from a well-respected family, and more than that, he loved her deeply. He treated her like a queen, cooked for her on lazy mornings, held her hand during evening walks, and whispered promises of forever into her ears under the moonlight. Amari couldn't ask for more. The compound she moved into after marriage was lively. Family members came and went, elders gathered under the mango tree, and children's laughter echoed through the yard. At first, everything felt like a happy blur. Kehinde's mother seemed distant, but polite. And then there was Dimeji, Kehinde's older brother. He lived in the compound too, older, quieter, always watching. In the beginning, Amari thought he was just reserved. He barely spoke to her, but when he did, there was something about the way his eyes lingered too long, something she couldn't quite explain. Still, she brushed it off. She told herself she was overthinking. Life was good. She was married to the man she loved. Maybe Dimeji was just awkward. Maybe he'd warm up. She focused on adjusting, learning family routines, helping her mother-in-law in the kitchen, figuring out how to be a good wife. But even in her happiest moments, a strange feeling tugged at her, a small, uneasy shadow that she tried hard to ignore. It started with little things. At first, Amari didn't even notice. One afternoon while Kehinde was at work, Dimeji passed by the kitchen where she was cooking and said, "You're too pretty to be sweating over a pot." She laughed nervously, thinking it was just a joke. Maybe he was just trying to be friendly. But then it happened again and again. Compliments that felt too personal, smiles that lasted too long, looks that made her skin crawl. Dimeji began showing up in places he didn't usually go, sitting outside the bathroom when she stepped out in her wrapper, asking unnecessary questions while she was doing laundry, pretending to need help with chores only when Kehinde wasn't home. He started calling her Sweet Amari in a tone that made her uncomfortable. Sometimes he stood too close. Sometimes his eyes wandered. But Amari kept telling herself it was nothing. She didn't want to create problems in the family. She wanted peace. She didn't even tell Kehinde. She feared he might not believe her, or worse, think she was overreacting. One day, while Kehinde was away on a work trip, Dimeji knocked on her door with a broken phone, saying he needed her help. She told him to wait outside, but he stepped in anyway, standing too close as she tried to explain something about the phone. She could feel her heart beating fast, but she smiled, trying to act normal. She didn't want to make noise. She didn't want the neighbors to talk. She just wanted to stay safe. What scared her the most was how calm he always seemed, how normal he acted around everyone else, like nothing was wrong. No one else seemed to notice. He was Kehinde's brother, the first son of the house. Amari told herself to endure, to stay respectful, to pray it would pass. But deep inside, something was beginning to shift. The fear, the discomfort, the feeling that her own home was no longer safe. The real trouble didn't begin with shouting or fights. It began with whispers, quiet, poisonous words spoken when no one else was around. Dimeji started planting tiny seeds of doubt in Kehinde's mind, always pretending to care. "Brother, I'm only telling you because I love you," he would say, his voice low and concerned. "Amari spends too much time on her phone. Who is she always chatting with?" Or sometimes, "You trust her too much. I've seen the way she smiles at visitors. Be careful." Kehinde, at first, brushed it off. He loved Amari. He believed in her. But Dimeji kept going, slowly, quietly, always choosing the right moment, after a long day, or when Amari wasn't around to defend herself. "I'm just saying, not every woman is as innocent as she looks," Dimeji said one evening, shaking his head like he truly felt sorry. But he didn't stop there. He began poisoning their mother's heart too. "Amari doesn't respect you, Mama," he would say. "She rolls her eyes when you're not looking. She's not from a strong family. What do you expect?" Soon, the small courtesies Amari once received in the house began to fade. Kehinde's mother, once distant but polite, grew cold. She would mutter under her breath, ignore Amari's greeting, complain that Amari was lazy or rude, even when she had done nothing wrong. Amari felt the shift like a cold wind. Kehinde became quieter, his hugs shorter, his questions sharper. The warmth in the house was fading, replaced by suspicion. And yet, no one said anything directly. There were no accusations, just tension, silence. looks that said more than words ever could. She didn't understand what was happening at first. She just kept trying, cooking Kehinde's favorite meals, waking early to help her mother-in-law, praying harder than ever, but it felt like fighting an invisible enemy. She didn't know Dimeji was behind it all, slowly turning her own family against her. It was like living in a house that smiled at her in the morning and stabbed her in the back by night. Something was breaking, quietly, and she didn't know how to stop it. It happened on a night that seemed normal at first. Kehinde had gone to visit a friend who had just welcomed a new baby, and Amari stayed home, tired from the day's chores. She had just finished washing plates when she heard a soft knock at the back door. It was Dimeji. He stepped inside without waiting for her to answer. "I just came to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. His voice was low, too calm. Amari felt her heart begin to race. She stepped back slowly, wiping her hands nervously on her wrapper. But Dimeji didn't stop talking. "Kehinde doesn't see you like I do," he said, walking closer. "You deserve more. Someone who truly notices you." His eyes were dark with something she couldn't understand, something that made her stomach twist. "Please leave," she said, her voice shaking, but he didn't. In a flash, he was too close, grabbing her wrist, trying to touch her face, his breath hot and unwanted. Amari struggled, pushed, kicked. Somehow she broke free and ran into the hallway, her wrapper slipping from her shoulder, tears running down her cheeks. She locked herself in the bedroom, heart pounding so loud it hurt her ears. She stayed there, frozen, until she heard the front door shut and silence returned. When Kehinde came home later that night, she ran to him, crying, shaking, begging him to listen. She told him everything, how Dimeji had cornered her, tried to force himself on her. She thought he would hold her, defend her, believe her, but he didn't. Instead, he looked at her like she was a stranger. "Amari, stop," he said. "Dimeji told me you've been acting strange, that you're always trying to get attention." She felt the floor drop beneath her. "You think I made this up?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He looked away. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Amari sat on the floor, broken. The man she loved, trusted, had turned his back on her. And the worst part, Dimeji had planned it all. She could see it now. Every lie, every whisper, every step was a trap, and she had walked straight into it, alone. The whispers started the next morning. By noon, they had turned into loud voices, and by evening, the entire compound was talking. Amari didn't understand how fast it happened, but somehow, everyone seemed to know her story. Only, it wasn't her story. It was the twisted version Dimeji had created. "She's not a respectful wife," one auntie said. "I saw the way she looked at the neighbour's son. I heard she flirts with men on the phone," another added. "She tried to seduce her own brother-in-law," someone else whispered. "And the cruelest one of all, she's possessed, maybe even a witch." Amari could barely breathe. Everywhere she went, eyes followed her. The warm greetings were gone. Now, no one sat with her. No one asked if she had eaten. The silence from her mother-in-law spoke volumes, and Kehinde. He was no longer the man who used to hold her close at night. He was distant, cold, ashamed even. Not of Dimeji, but of her. She tried to speak up, to explain herself, but every word only seemed to make things worse. They said she was lying, that she was making stories to cover her shame, that good wives don't cause trouble in their husband's house. Kehinde's uncles came one evening and sat him down. "You must return her," they said, "before she brings more disgrace. Let her go back to her father's house." Amari heard everything through the thin walls. Her heart shattered slowly, piece by piece. After all she had endured, she was being thrown away like she meant nothing, like she was the problem. She packed her small bag with trembling hands. No one helped her. No one stopped her. Not even Kehinde. She looked at him one last time, hoping for something, anything, but he just turned away. So she walked, past the compound, past the whispers, past the shame they had tried to bury her under. She walked with tears in her eyes, but her back straight. Her heart was heavy, but something deep inside her refused to die. They thought they had ruined her. They didn't know. Amari was not broken, not yet. Amari arrived in Okitipupa with nothing but a small bag, swollen eyes, and a heart full of pain. Her aunt, Mama Ronki, didn't ask too many questions. She just opened her arms and held her like a mother would. "You'll be safe here," she said softly. and for the first time in weeks, Amari believed it. At first, Amari barely spoke. She moved like a shadow, helping around the house, cooking quietly, folding clothes, trying to keep her mind from going back to Zubari. But Mama Ronke saw the fire in her, dimmed, but not dead. One day, she took Amari with her to the small legal aid center where she volunteered. "Just come and sit," she said. "It might help." That little center changed everything. Amari began by filing papers and making tea for the staff. Then she started listening, really listening, to the stories women came in with. Stories that felt too close to hers. Stories of pain, silence, and being pushed away. Slowly, she started asking questions, then reading the books they left around the office. Law books, rights documents, case files. She stayed up late after work, studying, writing notes, asking the lawyers questions. They saw her interest, her hunger to understand. One of the lawyers, a kind woman named Ifeoma, began mentoring her. "You don't just have a voice, Amari," she told her one day. "You have a weapon. You just need to learn how to use it." So Amari learned. She learned how to write reports, gather evidence, record conversations, and understand the law. She learned how to protect women like her. She began helping others, quietly but powerfully. And with every story she helped rewrite, she began to heal. She wasn't the scared girl who had walked away from Zubari anymore. She was still kind, still soft, but now she was strong. She no longer waited for someone to save her. She was saving herself, and soon she would save others too. 2 years had passed, but Amari hadn't forgotten. Not the pain, not the betrayal, and definitely not the truth. She had grown stronger in Okitipupa, wiser. She had helped so many women find their voices, but deep in her heart, she knew she had one more thing to do. She had to return to Zubari, not for revenge, but for justice. When word spread that a women's rights event was coming to Zubari, people were curious. Flyers were posted. Invitations were sent to elders, leaders, mothers, and even young girls. The event promised open conversations, education, and healing. No one knew that Amari was the one behind it all. She arrived quietly, dressed with confidence, but no arrogance. She greeted familiar faces, many of whom couldn't hide their surprise. Some looked away in shame, others watched in silence. Kehinde was there, Dimeji too. No one knew what was coming. The program began like any other. A few speakers, some music, women sharing their stories. Then Amari stepped up. The room went still. Some gasped, some whispered, but she didn't flinch. "I'm here today," she said calmly, "not as a victim, but as a voice." Then she pressed play. On the screen behind her, recordings began to play. Audio clips, Dimeji's voice, clearly making suggestive comments. Hidden videos of him sneaking into the kitchen, getting too close. Whispered conversations with relatives, where he spoke lies about her. Screenshots of messages, all dated, all real. The room froze. Mouths hung open. Kehinde's face went pale. Dimeji tried to laugh it off at first, but there was nothing left to say. The evidence was too strong, too clear. Amari had come prepared. People started to murmur. Some women began crying. The elders sat speechless. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was truth, loud, unshakable, and now public. Amari stood tall, not with pride, but with purpose. For every woman who had been silenced, for every girl who had been blamed, she wasn't just exposing Dimeji. She was exposing a system that let men like him hide behind respect and silence. And this time, nobody could shut her up. The crowd sat in stunned silence as Amari's voice echoed through the speakers. Every clip she played hit like thunder. Dimeji's sly compliments, his dirty suggestions, the way he spoke about her when he thought no one would hear, the words he used, the way he laughed while lying about her, it all spilled out into the open. People turned to look at him. Mothers shook their heads. Fathers clenched their jaws. Girls in the crowd looked at their brothers, their uncles, wondering how many more like him were hiding behind smiles and respect. Kehinde sat like a ghost, eyes wide, face drained of all colour. His head dropped in shame. Everything he had once doubted was now undeniable. Amari didn't flinch. She stood strong, holding a microphone, voice steady. "This is not just my story," she said. "This is what happens when women are silenced, when lies are louder than truth." The town elders stood up one by one. Men who had once told her to endure, to stay quiet for peace, now bowed their heads in guilt. One elder stepped forward, speaking into the mic with a shaky voice. "We failed you, Amari, and we failed ourselves. We are sorry." It wasn't just an apology. It was a crack in the wall of silence that had protected men like Dimeji for generations. Then suddenly, Dimeji stood up from his seat. His eyes darted around. He knew the weight of the truth had become too heavy. He tried to leave quietly, slipping toward the back, but it was too late. A woman from the legal aid center stepped forward, holding up court documents. "You're not walking away from this," she said firmly. "There's a warrant for your arrest. Attempted assault, defamation, obstruction of justice." Gasps filled the air. Police officers who had been standing at the edge of the crowd walked up and handcuffed him before he could take another step. He shouted, cursed, begged, but no one was listening anymore. All eyes were on Amari, not with pity, not with gossip, but with respect. She hadn't just spoken, she had proven. She hadn't just survived, she had fought back. And in that moment, Zubari changed, because one woman finally made the truth louder than the lies. Dimeji was taken away in handcuffs, still shouting, still denying, but no one was listening anymore. His lies had been crushed under the weight of Amari's truth. The town had seen everything. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. Justice had finally come knocking, and it came with evidence, witnesses, and law on its side. Days later, news of his arrest spread far beyond Zubari. People whispered his name now with shame, not pride. And for once, it wasn't the woman's fault. It wasn't the victim being blamed. It was the guilty who was being held accountable. Kehinde showed up at Amari's office a week after the event. He looked smaller somehow, like the truth had shrunk him. He stood at the door, nervously holding his cap in his hands. "Amari," he said quietly, "I was wrong. I should have believed you. I'm sorry." She looked at him, calm and clear-eyed. She didn't hate him. She had cried all her tears years ago, but she wasn't the same woman he married. "I don't need your sorry," she said gently. "What I needed back then was your voice beside mine." He nodded, ashamed, and then he left, knowing deep down that he had lost her, not because someone took her, but because he let her fall alone. Amari now stood tall in Okitipupa, not just as a survivor, but as a guide. She worked full-time as a community legal educator, helping women learn their rights, how to speak up, how to protect themselves. She taught them how to document everything, how to stay safe, how to fight smart. Every workshop she led, every girl she encouraged, every law she explained, it was her quiet revenge, not with anger, but with purpose. She no longer whispered. Her voice had become her power, and through it, she was helping build a world where girls like her would never be silenced again. The sun was just rising as Amari walked through the familiar dusty paths of Zubari. The same streets that once echoed with whispers behind her back now met her with quiet respect. Women greeted her with soft smiles, and children looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. Some of the elders even stood when she passed, heads slightly bowed, words caught in their throats. She wasn't wearing anything grand, just a simple dress, a pair of sandals, and a file tucked under her arm. But there was something different about the way she carried herself. Calm, firm, free. No shame, no fear, just strength. The house she had once been chased from now sat quiet, its windows closed. The same compound that called her wicked was now silent in her presence. And Kehinde, he saw her from afar, but didn't come close. He knew now, Amari didn't belong to anyone's shadow anymore. A young girl ran up to her and held her hand. "Auntie Amari, will you teach us again today?" she asked. Amari smiled, bent slightly and said, "Of course. Every voice matters, even yours." She kept walking, head high. She had come back not to prove anything, but simply to be. Not as a broken wife, not as someone's victim. She was Amari, the girl they tried to break, the woman they tried to silence. But she had risen, not in anger, but in purpose. She had turned her wounds into wisdom, her silence into a sword. And now, she was no longer just respected, she was remembered.